Board Gamers Anonymous, the podcast about board gamers and the insane fun we have at the table together. This is Chris.
Hey, this is Anthony.
And this is episode 499, Top 100 Games of All Time, number 21 to number 11. We'd like to thank all our Patreon backers for helping us bring you a brand new episode. Welcome back, friends. We're getting there. We're getting down to it. Anthony, my friend, number 20 to number 11.
We are so close. You say episode 499. I'm like, just round up.
I was really happy to say that.
Yeah, just round it up. We're almost there.
499, man.
It's close. Just round it up.
It's on sale.
It's on sale.
$4.99. People are going to buy into this episode. They're going to be like, this is the episode.
Yeah, that's the magic number. Next week, it's 5.
And no one pays
that's
that.
a whole different number.
No one's going to pay that.
$5.
This is the cheaper of the two episodes. So if you got, a little less to spend, this is the episode you want to spend it on.
Yeah. Give, play that analogy out. Back us on Patreon.
Yeah, please do. That's always very helpful for us. But we're so glad to have you here on this episode, number 20 to number 11. Really great games. Anthony, as we've been talking about every week, it's been coming up. Your vibe. What is your vibe for your 10 here?
The vibe. Interesting this week. I was looking at this earlier. I was trying to figure out exactly where everything landed, and it's not. There's not like any single clear delineation this time around. There's a lot of cities, so I could do that. There's a lot of card play going on here. I don't know that I could really boil it down to like a single thing. Like of all the weeks, every other week, and I'm like, yeah, no, there's a theme here. This time around, I'm like, I don't know, it's pretty eclectic for me.
Sure.
They're all heavy, but that's just my top games. So none of these is less than 2 hours. That's for sure.
Depending on you play it.
Yeah. If you play it solo or on an app, some of these could be done in an hour.
But. Sure. Or multiples of other things.
Yeah.
Well, no, I think Cities is good. I think Cities fits more or less everything there.
Yeah, that's true. Cities, small areas, small regions, towns.
I mean, the
building stuff or destroying stuff.
Yeah, I think for this week for me, I'm you mentioned it a little bit, building. Yeah. So all the games that I have here on my list is building a thing, building blank. And that's kind of interesting. I mean, I do like Euro games for the opportunity to build a machine or to build up a civilization or to build a tableau. The idea of just constructing and organizing and developing. That's one of the great things of those type of games.
Mm-hmm.
It's not just like running along on a rail, like do this thing. It's like, nope, build up something. And got a lot of building things up there.
Yeah. I guess I could almost fit in that as well. Like with a couple of exceptions, mine there's a lot of building in mine as well.
Very true. All right. Well, Anthony, speaking of build up here, beyond number 500, the really important episode is 501.
Yeah. This is where we self-servingly have been talking about our own top 100 games for this is week number 9 now.
The greatest games of all time.
The greatest games of all time, bar none. There's no argument to be had, so just move along.
Move along, people.
But in episode 501, we are asking all of you to tell us what your favorite games of all time are, and you can answer that question right now. So if you go to BoardGamersAnonymous.com, at the very top of the page, you will see our listeners' top 100 games of all time contest.
Nice.
Click that. It's also on Facebook. And you can fill out a form, a very simple Google form, where it'll ask you for your top 10 games. And you can also put in your name and email address. So how this works is we aggregate these for a couple weeks. So sometime next Thursday, the day before we record episode 500, I will go through and I will build a top 100 list out of all of this. And then we will put that out there, and that'll be episode 501. We're going to share that with the world. Now, in the meantime, if you do fill this out and you do remember to give me your email address, you are entered into a contest to win. Doesn't matter what you put in your top 10, as long as you complete the top 10, right? Give us 10 games that we can use to build our list, and you are entered in a contest to win one of the games from the final top 100. We are giving games away to 3 individuals who fill us out. So please give us your contact info. Otherwise, you can't win because I don't know who you are.
There you go.
Um, and yeah, no, it's awesome. And it's we do this every now and then, but in the past we've done like a top 10 or a top 20. This is the first time we've done a top 100 from the listeners. So
Hmm.
the more people who fill it out, the better, because we will have that much more to work with, right?
Sure.
Like we already have a bunch of submissions now, just since the last time I put it up, and I'm really interested to see where it goes from there. So please fill it out.
Yeah, I mean, this is the podcast where everyone's equal at the table. It's a nice round table. So we do our top 100. You do your top 100. Obviously, your top 100 is going to be better, but we won't say that yet. We'll leave that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
we still have our own top 100. Okay, people.
Yeah.
And Anthony, that's actually our next episode.
Yeah, it's crazy. One more week. I gotta be
And
ready. I gotta like look nice.
you have to get dressed up and all fancy like,
I know. I gotta
line
like
up your meeples and stuff like that.
it's like a Friday evening. I gotta like shave and put on a clean shirt or something. I don't know.
And of course, that's because episode 500 will be a live feed episode.
Yes, we are gonna be broadcasting this episode live on November 1st, which is next Friday, or this Friday, if you're listening to this, um, at 9 p.m. Eastern, 6 p.m. Pacific. So this you can log on to our YouTube channel or our Twitch channel. Links will be in the show notes here, or if you're a subscriber on YouTube, which you should be by now, it's another contest where you can win some games. You will get the notification when we go live. So that'll be 9 o'clock Eastern next Friday, this Friday, November 1st. And that it'll of course be recorded. You can watch it at a later time. But if you want to be there live, you can join us in the chat. You can comment. We're going to be interacting with people. It's going to be a lot of fun. And yeah, don't miss it.
Yeah, it's gonna be excellent. It's our first time doing this.
Yeah, we've done Twitch in the past, but it wasn't this. It wasn't the whole podcast
Sure.
broadcast live, like on multiple like this is a big deal. So we're really excited about it.
Yeah, it's number 500. We want to do something super big. So many of you have signed up on YouTube. We appreciate it. I know many of you don't listen to the podcast via YouTube. But again, numbers are important because algorithms and helps a lot of other people get the podcast out. So we want to hit the solid zeros for the 1,000, but we also want you to join us at the table live in person so that we can text and chat. So it just gives you another way to connect with the podcast and all the great gamers out there. And there's so many of them out there. So we're really excited to have an opportunity to talk to you all and, work out our final 10, the 10.
The
So,
top 10, man, it's a big deal. Mine legit, I've had people ask me like recently, like
uh-huh.
like legit, what is your top number one game now? And I'm like, I'm not gonna tell you. But what I will tell you, and this is a secret for only people who back at the producer level or higher on Patreon, is that I've put up the last of my behind the scenes videos.
Ooh.
So I've done 4 of these. It's like a behind the scenes, me putting together my top 100, which again, self-serving, but it's fun to do. You can watch a couple hours of me going through and building it out and the tools I use and what I did on the list. But the last episode, the one that's up right now, if you want to see the top 100 early, all of
Even I don't know what those are.
even Chris, yeah, you could go watch it, but don't cheat. Um, you can see it 2 days early. There's spoilers up there if you back at the producer level or higher. So check that out. Those of you who've already watched it, you already know my number one game, but nobody else does. It's a secret.
I legitimately do not know.
No, I've like it's all in the spreadsheet, except I have not been putting my list every week until we go to record it.
Yes.
Um,
I've done the work in advance. And this other guy's like, you're just gonna have to wait, man.
yeah, I mean, I did the work. I'm just not sharing the work. Also, as I'll reveal in the bonus episode, I have been tweaking the list up until about 3 weeks ago. So,
Sure. Well, I mean,
um,
it's a pretty big thing. I mean, 10 years you had War of the Ring
yeah.
as your number one. So this is going to be monumental.
Yeah, and while I have tweaked a bunch of stuff, the number one has been set since August. Like, I
Okay.
did the list, I made the number one, it hasn't changed. I've moved a few other things around here and there based on what I've been playing, but the number one, I was like, "Nope, this is it. I feel good about this." So, I'm excited to talk about it. I don't think you'll guess it.
Mm. I have a new number one too.
Oh, okay.
Nobody knows that.
Okay.
You have to be in the super, 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 super producer level to
Yeah,
be able to know that. But
our spreadsheet.
it's the spreadsheet, the secret,
Yeah.
super, super spreadsheet.
I'm in that level.
I know you're the only one.
Yeah. Yeah, that's true. We're gonna find out someone has the link out there. Like, no, don't do
Oh,
that.
see the little thing gets leaked to Wikipedia and just gets out there, and there's investigations, and it's all. We don't want to see that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, Daniel and Drew, old friends of the show, they have access to the
Do they
spreadsheet.
really?
So yeah, yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
Do they even know they still have access to
Probably not.
that? That's so funny. All right, well, we got a lot of great stuff happening, and again, we're talking about our big contest and our big listeners' top 100 games of all time. Live feed is coming up this week on Friday at 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then, of course, we want you to subscribe early and like the feed on YouTube. So this way you get all of the notifications when we pop up there so you can join us there at the table. And then, of course, next week, the top episode, number 500. We do the last 10. And then, of course, for those of you who do want to meet or do want to hang out or do want to play games in person, PAX Unplugged, Anthony.
Oh my gosh, so many announcements. I'm tired. Oh, I'm just kidding. It's exciting. Yeah, I mean, PAX Unplugged is 6 weeks from now. Um,
It's
it
getting there.
always it always sneaks up on me. Like the fall is so busy, and then all of a sudden it's December. So yeah, PAX Unplugged is coming. It's gonna be awesome. December 6th, 7th, and 8th. We will be there all of those days. Uh, we will be presenting a panel on 2 of those days. December 7th at 2:30 p.m. in the Crab God Theater, we'll be presenting our panel on teaching games, and then on Sunday at 2:30 or 4. It's 4 o'clock on Sunday.
It is 4 o'clock. Mhm.
Chris, you'll be presenting a panel on inclusion and accessibility in games, right?
Yeah, with a bunch of our friends from a number of different organizations. So it's a really great opportunity to learn about how best to teach tabletop games. And then the other panel will help you welcome a diverse group of people to the table. Because again, that's what makes tabletop gaming so great is inviting and having everyone enjoy that kind of inclusive experience. And all of these different experts and leaders in the industry who have worked with all different types of groups and made the table as accessible as possible makes gaming as great as possible. And typically we don't think about that, but really it's essential. It's important and it gets gaming out to more people so that it's not so hard to get games to the table when everyone's playing.
Yeah, yeah, that'll be fun.
So we'll have a lot of fun at both panels, a lot of good times. Our friend Will Nation will be joining us for the first panel, and then everyone else for the second panel as
Yeah,
well. We'll have more details about that. Check out on, I think, especially on Facebook, but I'm sure Anthony will post it on BoardGamersAnonymous.com and also Board Game Academics. And you can also find more information about the two panels at PAX Unplugged because that will be also part of their schedule.
right.
So a lot of great places to find out a lot of great information and a lot of great stuff about tabletop gaming. All right, Anthony. Hopefully, at the moment, this is also because we're doing good stuff, which is good. But we're gonna do the best stuff, which is this list, because it's tabletop gaming, man. We gotta get some tabletop to the table. So why don't you start us off with your number 20?
Number 20. All right. So this one represents a bunch of games because I really, really like this genre of games, but I didn't want to have more than one in the top 100 because I do not play them very often. And that is 18xx games, and in particular, 1889 or Shikoku 1889. So 18xx is a whole family of games based on 1830, Railways and Robber Barons, which was designed by Francis Tresham, originally based in 1829, way back in the 1980s. So this formula's been around for a long time. And the basic idea, if you've not played one of these, is that there are multiple different companies building out trains on a hex map. Nobody owns any of these companies, but you buy in stock into them, and then you can have controlling interest in the company to be able to activate and operate them. People will gain money based on how much stock they have in each of these companies. So it is a ruthless, brutal economic game where you don't really own anything except the stocks that you have in these companies. You can have private companies as well in some of these games. They have different sized maps. They have different rules that kind of layer into them. It is at the end of the day, though, it is like a stock market game, and you are trying to minimize your risk and maximize your reward and absolutely bankrupt all of your opponents. The games take a long time. They're very mathy. They're very heavy. Like if you either love them or you just don't understand it, I think it's where most people fall. And I really, really fell in love with the genre in 2019. We played a bunch of these games back in Pittsburgh before COVID hit, and even then we played online for a while. Like there's a lot of these you can play online. So the reason I picked Shikoku 1889 is because it is probably, for me at least, the best entry level of these. There's a few that I'd consider entry level. 18 Chesapeake is a good one as well. Um, but this one, it has a really small map. It has some private company elements, but they're pretty straightforward. So it's a little bit shorter. It's a little bit tighter, and it's streamlined in a way that a lot of the other games aren't. Like you look at the map, and there's really not that many places you can go, so the game ends up being a little bit shorter. Whereas you look at a game like 1822 and like one of the bigger maps, and it could have hundreds and hundreds of hexes. The game could last 8-10 hours, which is fun in its own way, but much less inviting if you're trying to get new people to the table. So Shikoku 1889 is uh, a newer release of this. The original version of this game came out in 2004. It's designed by Yasutaka Ikeda, and it was brought back recently by Grand Trunk Games. It was on Kickstarter, um, and I was very excited to back this because the only version I played of it before was like a print and play copy that my friend had. So I have a nice, fancy new version of the game with beautiful cover art and halfway decent board art. Um, and it's just a really pleasant way to experience this genre of game without it taking a million years. It's still going to take 3 or so hours, but it's not out of the realm of possibility of fitting it into a game night versus having to set aside an entire day for it. So, Shikoku 1889 is my choice as my favorite 18xx game because it's probably the one I can get played the most easily, and it is that genre in general is my number 20.
Excellent. I still have not played an 18 X game yet.
We tried. Yeah, I brought these to your house. I brought this one to your house, actually. My friend lent me his print and play copy,
Sure.
and we couldn't find enough other people willing to sit down and play with us.
Yeah.
Like, I got you to agree, and we couldn't find at least 2 other people to also agree. So,
It's a bit of yeah. It almost
someday,
happened.
someday, someday.
I appreciate them, typically from a distance, but I appreciate them nonetheless.
That is true. Yeah. I own, like, 6 or 7 of these. Um, this is the one I would carry with me anywhere. The other ones, I'm like, only if we really if you know, we'll play the game.
Sure.
89, 89, I would play with anybody.
Yeah, because just from a distance standpoint, and again, this can be said for a lot of things, especially Euro gamers in general. Like
Mhm.
it's a spreadsheet from a distance.
Oh, yeah, I mean, it's a stock chart, and
Yeah,
but
and the map is quite sparse.
yeah, but, like, if you look at the new 89 map, it is pretty.
It is pretty.
It is pretty. They made it pretty somehow. Um, they're getting better at that. Grand Trunk Games does a good job, and All Aboard Games as well. They do, like, the other big stuff on Kickstarter. Their recent stuff is very nice.
Yeah, I think they've finally started to consider that, if you're going to play a game for 4 to 5 hours,
Mhm.
it'd be nice if it looked good, if there was something a little more to it. Um, and that would certainly invite more people to the table, especially when it's a lot of crunching percentages and such.
Yeah, yeah, it is a lot of math, and it does have this thing where, like, if you get far enough into the game, you can math it out and figure out who's gonna win.
Mm,
So, it's like I know people who don't even finish these games because you get far enough and you can just look at it and be like, "Well, you're gonna win because of these things." Like, "Oh, okay.
sure.
I guess we're done then." Which I know can be anticlimactic and people don't enjoy that, but, um, I don't know. There's something about it. It's something about this formula that really clicks for me.
All right. Well, I guess at least in the same time zone as far as gameplay is concerned, but radically different in a lot of ways. Roll for the Galaxy 2014. Uh, won't take you a millennial to play, but
No.
nonetheless, in my tabletop gaming over many, at least a decade, if not more now at this point, of enjoying like these really classic, great tabletop games that everyone has loved. Everyone gets on the table. They're just ubiquitous when you talk about tabletop gaming. And Race for the Galaxy was always one of those games that everyone had a copy, everyone was playing it, everyone had, well-loved cards that got to the table, and it was good. It's a good game. It's sincerely a good game. Didn't make my top 100, but it's a good game. Roll for the Galaxy came along, and for me, it elevated the game. Now, Roll for the Galaxy, very similar to Race for the Galaxy, but where Race for the Galaxy you play your cards not only for to be planets and developments and such, and then you also use them for resources. Here at Roll for the Galaxy, of course, as it sounds, you have dice, and you're going to be rolling the dice, and the dice allows you to gain um, a little more risk and press your luck as far as gameplay is concerned because you have these nice chunky tiles that build up your tableau of different planetary civilizations and developments. And along with those planets and the development, it gives you opportunities to utilize different dice, different colored dice that have different symbols on it because sometimes you want to ship products, sometimes you want to produce products, sometimes you want to gain new planetary systems to add to your tableau. A number of different actions, and all of those actions are controlled by the dice. There's mitigation from the different planets and developments that come into play, so it gives you a number of options. Also, it allows you to benefit off of other players and what they're doing as well. So it still utilizes Race for the Galaxy, the best elements of it. It corrects some of the challenges with the production and the shipping, and then it provides a beautiful, gorgeous, colorful tableau of planets and dice and numerous different interactions to kind of get this to the table. It's a tremendous amount of fun. There's expansions for this as well, some better than others, but it's always a great time. Race for the Galaxy.
Yeah,
I'm
Roll for the
sorry,
Galaxy
Roll for
is
the Galaxy.
great. Yeah. I know which one you're talking about.
Yeah,
Um, I still own this. I have all the expansions for it, even the big stupid one.
even the big stupid one. Yeah,
Yep, which was on sale at some point. This box now weighs like 10 pounds.
it's a lot of dice.
It's so many dice. It's a brilliant game though. I absolutely love this game. It's Race for the Galaxy, like you said, it was always fine. I'll
Yeah.
play it, but Roll for the Galaxy, I'm like, absolutely. Like we always talk about our number 101 game. This is like 105 for me.
Yes. Excellent.
All right. Next up for me is my number 19, Teotihuacan, City of Gods. And I'm sorry, Jason, I'm sure I'm still saying that wrong, but
I know. We
he
all are. It's fine.
he fixed it for me a few years ago, and then I think I've strayed from it. But so this is a game by Daniel Tashini. Came out in 2018 from at the time NSKN Games, now Board and Dice.
Hmm.
And I remember the first time I played this. You were not there actually. You had to
Okay.
leave early. This was at Origins
Oh.
back in 2018, and you had to leave early for a family thing. And so I was just walking around demoing stuff that day, and there was a table open, and I sat down and played it, and I was like, "This is amazing. This is going to be a very popular game." And it was because for two reasons. One, it's very good. Two, they came out and they made it relatively affordable. It was like 50 MSRP, and you could get it online for $35, which in 2018 still, I know it's 6 years ago, but even then prices were starting to skyrocket. So a $35 heavy euro, you're like, that's pretty good. Um, and so it spread a lot, and I'm glad it did because it is a very good game. It has some gimmicky stuff, of course. It's a Tashini game, so you are building a pyramid at the middle based on these little square tiles. But really, the core of the game is this mechanism where you are moving your dice around this rondelle shaped board, and you're taking actions based on the number of dice and the pips on those dice on each location. And that is like so much strategy to think through because it's not just moving and where you're going to move them and how you're going to move them and how you're going to manage the pips. Because once you reach 6 pips on a die, which sometimes you can't control, if you use that die, it's gonna
Ascend.
raise up, gonna ascend here. That's the word I'm looking for.
Yeah.
Um, and then that's cool. You get a nice bonus for ascension, but now that die goes back to a 1 and it moves back to the beginning of the track. It's so much to keep track of, and it's so satisfying when you make it all align in the perfect
Mm.
way. And at the same time, your opponent can still get in your way because the cost of taking an action increases if other dice are on that space. So if you're like, I'm going to build a pyramid piece, and Chris goes there first, and I don't have the cocoa to pay to go there, I'm not building a pyramid piece because I don't have enough stuff to do it. So you always need backup plans as well. Uh, Expansions for the game are fantastic. You have multiple expansions that have come out over the years. Um, the first expansion, the first big expansion, I should say, the expansion period came out in 2021 and introduced asymmetrical player powers, which are my favorite types, where you get like one really cool game breaking thing and then one really bad thing, right? They're like, okay, so you can place your dice wherever you want, but you're not allowed to ever move up any of these tracks or something like that. They're like, oh, is this actually good or terrible? I can't tell. They're trying to work your way through that. They've released several other expansions as well. They had the big box that came out just this year on the Kickstarter. Um, just an amazing, fantastic game. It's just all around. It's to me, it's Tashini's best solo design. Like he's done other games with like Luciani, but this is the best one he's worked on by himself. And it's the game that kicked off the T series from Board and Dice. Still the best of them though. So Teotihuacan, City of Gods, number 19 for me.
It's a really different take on a rondelle,
Yeah,
and it's not just a rondelle, but it's a rondelle a lot of times where you're racing around the rondelle with versus other people
yeah,
because you're trying to get to certain locations to get the resources before they're able to get to them, and then you're racing up a bunch of different tracks throughout.
yeah.
It's such a dynamic game, and again, a lot of times, not in our top 100 list, but a lot of times when people talk about Euro games or even modern board gaming, they're often like, "Hey, yeah, you kind of do this on your own for 2 hours, and they do
Yeah,
that
yeah.
on their own for 2 hours." And this game has so much interaction kind of built in, and I've played so many games of this, both in person and online, where it comes down to 1 or 2 points,
Yeah.
and just like, "Do you have the cocoa? Like, how many do you have?" Like,
Yeah,
and you can bang your head against the wall for days on that just because you're missing one thing
yeah.
or you're behind on one track or something like that. And that's a fantastic game. And it's like you said, it cannot be overstated. Thank you so very much for producing such a high quality game
Mm,
at a reasonable price. I mean, it brought so much joy to so many people. Now, of course, you have a super and crazy deluxe version. And
yeah.
again, we're fine with that because you first put out the base game, which was affordable, so that we could love all the other expansions and super deluxe that came after it. So, bravo.
Yes. Thank you. Great game.
Such a good
You
thing,
did
man.
the thing.
Stars across the board. All right. The next on my list here is a game I know that Anthony, you're a big fan of, and I'm a big fan of course. Lorenzo the Magnifico from 2016. Uh, this is from our friends Gili and Luciani and Brazzini, and this is all about the Italian Renaissance, in which you're employing your family members to help you um, build up Patreons and to help your noble family rise to prominence and fame. And it's your standard victory point game, but I think this game goes really hard. I mean, we had Marco Polo come out first, and we're like, this is amazing. We don't need anything more than this. This is great. And then this came out later, and it brought that kind of dice rolling, like unique dice rolling and action taking to a new level. Because in this game, the three dice that are rolled set the power of your family members to go out on the board. So you have four family members. Three of the dice will kind of depict what power level they have as far as what they're able to get from the different towers. Because basically, it's a tableau building. You're gaining different artisans and craftspeople and painters and a whole bunch of people from these towers to put in your tableau to work the fields, to dig up gold, to gain resources, to gain prominence, to be able to meet certain victory conditions on these contract cards. And then there's a fourth worker, which is neutrals, nothing, it's a zero. But you'll have a number of opportunities with uh, different assistants to help you move up those different tracks. Building up those tableaus and then putting them into action and watching them crank out resources, which crank out other resources, which crank out gold, which cranks out victory points, is so incredibly satisfying. And the expansion just makes this game even better. It's just
Hmm.
really a fun time. Lorenzo Magnifico.
Yeah, this is a great game. This was my number 81. And I remember when I put my list together, I'm like, "Is it that low?" Because I love this game. This is a
Yeah, you do.
fantastic Euro game. It's just there's so many good games out there.
There is.
Um, it's it is really, really good though, and it's one of those things when it first came out, I had people telling, "Oh, it's really tight. It like 4 players. It's really tight. It's, like, hard to get things done." And I was like, "Oh, that makes me want the game
Yes.
because I don't like these loose Euros where you can kinda do whatever you want and hope that you're the most efficient in doing it. It's fun in small like, in little bits, but you get tired of it because 'cause you're like, "I guess I did as best as I can." I don't know. This doesn't feel like one of those solo Euro games. It feels like something where you are fighting with each other for locations. It's great.
Yeah, maybe it was the online app version that brought this down for you.
Maybe. I forgot about that,
That
yeah.
was, like, the worst version of this ever.
The worst, and, like, you the physical stuff that came in that Kickstarter was also bad.
Yes,
They're
that
like,
was a
"Here's an
lot of
expansion. These are a bunch of take that cards." Like,
yes,
"No. No, thank you."
but the first expansion was very good.
First expansion's amazing. Yeah.
Yes.
Alright. Next up for me is number 18, a game that I remember vividly the first time we played this, because I fell in love with it immediately, and you and Daniel were like, "When is this gonna be over?" Imperial Settlers, Ignacy Trzewiczek's game from 2014, little Civ game in which you are building out a tableau of different settlers and civilization pieces from a faction deck and a general deck. So, on your turn, you will be building any number of these different things, but on the right side of your board, your little player board, you're going to put out general cards that come from like a shared deck, and on the left side comes the faction cards, which are specific to your civilization, of which there are now like 7 or 8 different civilizations through all the expansions. Um, each of those civilizations plays very differently, from like going out and attacking more to generating different types of resources. And ultimately, at the end of the day, you're trying to generate victory points, but you can also go out and mess with each other. You can attack people's stuff, raise it to the ground. You get resources when you attack it. Um, it is a really, really fascinating, interesting take on civilization. And saying it's a Civ game almost feels weird. That's almost the theme of the game. Because really, at the end of the day, it's a deck building type of tableau game. It's built based on another game that Trevicek did, the 51st State, which uses the similar like deck mechanics, but it, layers in that theme, which I really enjoy, and the artwork is fun and cheapified, and they've been using that now in other games for 10 years. And it's just I think the reason I fell in love with this game so much is because it was like one of the first games, like chunky games I played solo, and I would play this game like right before and right after my daughter was born, like home for a bunch of months, you know, and with my son who was 3 years old at the time, and he couldn't play, but we would just kind of shuffle the things around on the table, and it became a fun experience to have, just to sit down and kind of like clear my mind at the end of a work day and just run through a game of Imperial Settlers. I have the big box now, which you can't just go buy the big box with the stuff in it. It was like a separate box. A weird decision they made, but I have all the different stuff for it. They released a few like small independent packs. There are multiple campaigns for it to play solo or with other people. It's a bit of a messy release schedule that the game ended up getting, which is like random stuff that came out whenever Trevicek felt like making it, and eventually other designers kind of came in and built stuff for it. But at the end of the day, it's quirky, it's fun, it's cute, and it's just a satisfying puzzle to play. The one thing I will say is that the box is 45 to 90 minutes. If you play with 4 people, it is a 3.5 hour game. It is very long, and I think that's one of the reasons why the people I've played it with over the years have been like, "Meh, takes too long for what it is." So, I play with 1 or 2 people, I have a lot of fun. Imperial Settlers.
It really is such a thoughtful, well done kind of civilization building game, and the different factions that I mean, it has its challenges as far as like when you have to play into your faction, which is also
Yeah,
its strength.
yeah,
And then the expansions that came really opened the game up,
yeah.
and that was nice. And then they've really developed it over the years and innovated on it many times over. So it's one of the most solid civilization versus kind of games out there. And typically, when we talk about civilization games, this often gets overlooked and forgotten because it's so damn cute, I think.
Right, it doesn't feel like a Civ game, but you were
No,
doing all the Civ stuff, like, you're
you are
building up, you're generating resources, you're going out and attacking people.
the legit 4X.
Yeah. In a weird way, yes, it's cool.
How did you do that? Why? I'm gonna use my tiny little swords and throw it at your buildings, and they're gonna fall down and stuff like that. So
Yay!
I feel less bad because it's adorable.
Yeah, it gives me, like, Age of Empires vibes with the little goofy guy, like,
It's true.
that blended with, like, Warcraft or something. The little peons going out there and breaking things.
And how does it match up with like Empires of the North?
So, I've never really gotten into Empires of the North, and I
Okay.
think part of the reason is that that game really boils it all down.
Yes.
It gives you a deck, that's your deck, and that's
Hmm.
what you're playing with, which is cool, and it's more streamlined, it's easier to teach. There's, like, a rondel mechanism, like, action selection. This is much more open. You're gonna have a bunch of cards, you're building a tableau, and that's what I want. I want the puzzle of it. I think if I was gonna play with other people, I'd bring out Empires of the North because it's shorter and it's easier
Sure.
to teach.
Nice. All right. Well, my next up is number 18. This is another game that's constantly overlooked. It should not be because it's one of the best games out there from our good friend Stefan Feld. This is Bora Bora from 2013, and I've always had a love and fascination with Bora Bora. This is part of like Feld's trilogy of wonderful games at the time, like his era where he could do no wrong. He had Castles of Burgundy, Macau, and then Bora Bora came out. And all of those games utilize similar types of mechanics, right? It's about using dice in unique ways to generate actions, to gain resources, and in particular, you're on the islands here, and there are men actions and female actions as far as how they're able to work together. You're hiring workers, you're gathering resources, you're building up huts, you're buying jewelry, you're trading resources back and forth in shells, getting tattoos. There's temples that you can visit, and then you're expanding across all of these islands on Bora Bora, and it's a bright, beautiful, colorful game. That's one of the things that Feld was not always known for. They were very like Castles of Burgundy, the original edition, was various shades of beige and green. This has color. This really shows and represents the island. It's a really beautiful production. The color pops, all the images, the artwork is fantastic here, and the ways in which you're able to play the dice in order to take more and more powerful actions. So rolling's important, but there's also a number of ways to mitigate the dice rolling throughout the game. Building up that island with all of your huts as you kind of race for control of those different areas is wonderful. And then one of the really big things that kind of stood out to me, which was especially back in the day when this game came out, I really loved and enjoyed the opportunity to gain um, my own victory conditions. You'll have an opportunity to at the end of each round pick victory conditions to kind of be able to score. So you gain it. You start with a bunch, and then throughout the game, you're like, "This is working really well. I'll score this now. I'll score this one later. I won't score this one at all." And I really love that idea that your own particular tribal civilization can decide for themselves what's essential for their success and what matters most for them. Uh, Again, the utilizing of different actions, the civilization building here, these the chasing down and racing for resources is a lot of fun. It's a beautiful, wonderful little Feld game that often gets a look. Bora Bora,
I This is like one of maybe 3 or 4 Feld games I've not actually gotten around to playing.
Bora Bora.
I know. I had a copy, and obviously I had all
Yeah,
the
yeah.
Felds for a while, and I remember popping it open once, like, "Oh, I should learn this," and there was, like, some kinda grime on it
Oh
because 'cause I'd
no.
bought it secondhand, and I was like,
Aw.
I guess I don't have a copy." So, um, I've always wanted to play this. There was a guy in my old game group back in Pittsburgh who would always bring this, and we
Yeah.
could never get 2 other people to say yes. It was just like he'd be like, "Bora Bora?" I'm like, "Sure." No one else would say
Aw.
yes. Everybody looks at the box, they're like, "That's old. No,
Oh
thank you."
no.
And,
It's
like,
one.
the reimplementation that Queen did is like, that doesn't look interesting at
No,
all.
it does not. I mean, the beauty is the islands there, and
Yeah,
all of the cultural traditions that are properly represented there.
yeah.
And again, especially back in the day where things were not properly represented.
No, it's
So
surprising that it exists.
yeah, and Feld did a really good job there. So it's part of his like brilliant period there.
Yeah. Someday we'll play this.
Yes.
All right, I'm going to talk about a little game that maybe some of you've heard of. I don't know. It's under the radar. It's a
Huh?
secret. It's
Never.
one of those games that no one really talks about.
No.
So
Uh,
I'm pretty hip. I'm pretty hip right here.
that's right.
Uh, Brass Birmingham.
What? Who?
I
Where?
know. Since when? So this is yeah. Obviously, I'm joking. It's the number one game on Board Game Geek, and it has been for what, a year and a half now. Uh, it is the reimplementation, kind of updated version of Brass Lancashire, or just Brass, that came out back in 2007. This is the 2018 edition that came via Kickstarter. So Martin Wallace's brilliant Brass, which was unfortunately just a very ugly game, very very ugly. We've talked about this at length.
Yeah.
Just not an appealing thing to look at.
No, not even close.
So they ran a Kickstarter, they made it pretty, then they made a new version where Gavin Brown and Matt Tolman added some stuff and tweaked the game a little bit, and that version is the best version
It
by
is.
a lot. So it adds in the idea of the beer, right? So you are consuming the beer to transfer the things across the map. It adds in the scout action, which allows you to discard cards to take wild locations. It tweaks a bunch of other little stuff here and there, but ultimately it takes the core formula of Brass, which is that you are paying resources and building out industry tiles to the map that will then produce things. And once they've produced those things, they can flip over and they will score for you, right? And if there's 2 rounds to the game, there's like early industry and later industry. So you're going to building canals early. Later, you're building rails, expanding your network to allow you to reach new things, to grab that beer or score that stuff or export those goods. Um, Ultimately, you're trying to get the most victory points, but it's a game of like managing your cash flow, right? So it's not just about getting the points. You need the income, and you need to be able to manage the income. You can take loans, but that will lower your income, and you have to figure out how to kind of balance that out, which is always the best part of a Martin Wallace game. It's like you're going to take some loans, they're not necessarily bad unless you don't have a plan for how to pay them back, or how to respond to the way they affect your stuff. So every time I've played this, it's been a different experience because it's card based. The cards you get will determine where you can go on the map, and that is probably the best part of the game, right? Because if you didn't have that card system, it would start to feel samey. You're going to have best options here and there. You don't though. You go with what you have and you play tactically with a larger strategic vision. Um, and this is probably the best game that does that. Like this very tactical decisions within a larger strategic vision. And you really have to play it a few times to even understand or see where the best options are, how these different locations interact with each other, how to manage the coal and gas markets. It's just such a good game. So Brass Birmingham, gladly play this whenever, anytime. It's not even a question which is the better version of the game for me, at least. I know some old school gamers are like, no, no, yeah, the original's still good. I'm glad they did both, because now we can both be happy and have the game we love. But
And
Brass
both,
Birmingham.
yeah, both have a great production.
Oh yeah, yeah. They're the same level of production.
Yeah.
They're just different mechanics. And these are the games that got us the Iron Clays, which are amazing and way better than Paper Money. And I have like a whole giant set of them now.
Excellent. Yeah, this I unfortunately did not back this when it was on Kickstarter because I had played the original. Thanks, Dave. And Dave kind of swore up and down how great of a game it was, and the production really dragged it down.
Yeah,
And I'm not talking about like bad production. I'm talking about like sheet of paper kind of production
it was so bad.
with like tokens that were like from like an old bingo parlor.
I
And
I legit have to go look it up every time we talk about it. I'm like, was it that bad?
oh,
And I
it
look,
was.
and I'm like looking at it now. I'm like, yeah, that was pretty bad.
It was weirdly bad too.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, again, this is not some no-name designer who's just like throwing a prototype out there in the world. Like this was a known game, and this was again, it still was a very good game. Production kind of made it difficult. It again, coming from the level and the different games that I was coming from, this was certainly a challenging game. Like I had not played 18XX games. While I had played economic games, this game's economics were certainly a little more challenging, right?
Hmm.
Taking loans, taking that loss is a very big part of playing brass.
Hmm.
And then building up investments, building up buildings that you will not use and are totally cool with that
Yeah.
because you need other people to flip your buildings. Like, again, that's a big departure from the traditional Euro games that's all about building your own stuff. Here, your effectiveness and your score is almost always going to be based upon how you particularly place your buildings, what time and place in your routes, in order so everyone could be able to benefit off them, so that eventually, inevitably, you score all the points.
Yeah.
And as you mentioned, Brass Birmingham, with it opens up the markets. I think the
Yeah.
markets and the beer really opened up the game on a significant level. Brass Lancashire certainly would be in the top 10 regardless, but Brass Birmingham, again, I appreciate the people out there who like the immediate tightness of that market, but I do think that the beer and I do think that the open random markets that in the setup are essential for success, and clearly they are because it's the number one game of all time.
Yeah, yeah. I know before I'm like, I want a tight game, not a loose game, but I don't think of
Yeah, there's nothing.
Brass Birmingham as a loose game. I feel like it's just a well balanced game. Like
Sure.
it really finds a way, like no matter where you're at or what cards you have, you're gonna have options because of the way the markets function now.
Hmm.
And that's what makes the game so good. You're never really stuck.
It's quite a good little game.
Yeah, Brass Birmingham there. My
Woot.
number 17.
All right. Well, next up for me is my number 17, and it's quite a good little game. This is a game that Anthony introduced me to, which I've come to love a great deal. This is Watergate.
Ooh.
So, one of the most wonderful things about tabletop gaming is every once in a while, and I mean quite often, you learn something, or you learn more about a thing that you did not know, or
Boo learning.
I know.
We're having fun learning.
Well, that's the thing about tabletop gaming, Anthony. You may not know this, but tabletop gaming can teach you things while being fun.
What?
I know.
We should start a journal about that.
Okay, let's do it. So I knew about Watergate, and obviously, if you don't, Watergate is one of these big moments in American history. It's about these amazing journalists from the Washington Post that exposed the Nixon administration and all the wrongdoing it was happening. But through that process of journalism, remember journalism when journalism did a thing, investigative
Yeah.
journalism was a thing.
I was about to say you just mentioned the Washington Post, but RIP,
All right,
man.
so once upon a time there was investigative journalism. I mean, there still is, and I really appreciate all of those wonderful investigative journalists out there who are sometimes more than not risking their lives
Yeah.
to get out information from some very dangerous, very sketchy places out there. This was obviously one of those kind of quasi situations, and you get to play one of these different sides in this conflict. So it's a bit of a tug of war, and what it comes down to is if you've ever played Twilight Struggle, it's two equally but different sides that are pushing for different goals. So the Nixon administration wants to run out the presidency. So they are going to try to delay, distract, and obstruct what the journalists are doing. And the journalists are trying to connect two witnesses, two areas of proof that connect back to the presidents for the President Nixon for all of this wrongdoing. So it's really a fun dynamic back and forth as you play cards to take different actions to move whether it's your investigation forward or push the investigation back. And it's nice to have those unique card decks that kind of allow you to counter each other throughout the game. And it's close and it's tight and it's fun. It's a great little two-player game. I mean, it's a great game. Watergate.
Yes, I love this game. I will talk about it later.
It's higher. Damn it, he did
I did it. It's higher.
it.
You've been outflanked by this investigative
Ah,
podcaster.
I try to put you off, but you got through, man.
I did it. I did it. I connected it. All right. So for me, moving on to number 16, I've got Dune War for Arrakis. This is so backing up a little bit. We, at the start of all this, episode 490, we put on we put a few games on our Hall of Fame list, right? So there are several games that we are no longer talking about uh, as part of the top 100, right? War of the Ring was my number one game every year we did this. So forever, it's been my number one of all time. It's no longer there. So we don't know what my number one game is going to be. Now War for Arrakis comes out this last summer, and it is a re-implementation of War of the Ring. So I'm cheating a little bit, but I did not make it number one. So y'all should be okay with that. This is designed by Marco Maggi and Francesco Nepatello, same team that did War of the Ring, and it is a game in which you play as the Harkonnens and the Atreides, vying for control of Dune. And the game does a really good job of taking those mechanics from War of the Ring and re-implementing them in a way that is thematically sensible in the Dune universe. So the thing that makes War of the Ring so good is how thematic everything is, right? Everything you do, everywhere you go, all the cards, everything feels like part of that universe. So I was a little skeptical when they're like, "We're going to do that with Dune, but the same mechanics." I'm like, "How are you going to do that?" But they took the time to do it properly, right? Like you really do feel like you are trying to hide, maneuver around those sieges or destroy those sieges or blow a wall to get into through the mountains. You get your nuclears at one point, or your atomics. I'm sorry. At one point later in the game, you can use them strategically to blow something up. You're moving, or you're riding the sandworms to kind of bypass the movement rules if you're the Atreides, working with the Fremen. Like there's all these things you get to do, and they all feel like a deeply thematic part of this universe, and it's really cool. Like it's just a fun thing you get to do. Now, the one thing that the game does that's a little more interesting and different than, say, War of the Ring, which has characters and stuff, but it gives you this dashboard, and then the actions correlate to the different characters that you put out. So if you're putting out, if you have, Paul out on the map, then there's an ability that comes with that particular slot that you'll be able to use once um, per round, right? So then you're going to flip it over, and that card's been used. So you're going to be upgrading these throughout the game as you get out these different characters based on the other cards that you play from the decks that you're drawing from. The core mechanism where you roll dice and you take the actions based on the die face, which is in War of the Ring, is the same. But how those interact and how they're different between the Atreides and the Harkonnens is really fascinating. You still have the power imbalance. The Harkonnens have a lot more die actions to take than the Atreides, but the Atreides have all these free actions they can take. They control the sandworms. They're able to kind of shoot in there and do different things and take you out in different creative, interesting ways. The only thing that I really didn't find quite as fascinating is just the victory condition for the Atreides, right? Like War of the Ring, you're taking the ring to Mount Doom to destroy it. That's cool, right? It's just cool and thematic. The Atreides, in this case, you're completing these different objectives on these cards and moving up these tracks. It's a little abstract. And some of the things you're doing is like have Paul and Lady Jessica in the same location as each other at the end of the round. You're like, okay, I can do that, and like the Harkonnens know that you're trying to do that, but at the end of the day, it's just not quite as chunky and fascinating thematically speaking as like War of the Ring. But the game mechanics are all there, and it is just a all around amazing Dune game, which at this point a lot of them are. But this is my favorite of the bunch. Dune, War for Arrakis.
Fantastic. Still have not played this. You have this. I've not played this.
I know we've had a couple chances, and it
Ah,
just
man.
doesn't happen.
I must control the spice.
Yeah,
It's the only thing that really matters here.
yeah,
I can't tell, like, I did not back this. I did want to back it. And I'm just so glad it's so great. I can't say that enough.
yeah.
And so, and both factions again different but play quite well.
Yeah, they're very different. Like the Harkonnens obviously they have the vehicles that they send out. They're trying to harvest the spice, and then how much spice they harvest every round will determine like what actions they have availability to. And if they don't harvest enough spice in a round, like if the Atreides really hit them hard, then they
Hmm.
get they start losing abilities. Bad things happen to them with these different Imperial decrees. Um, Whereas the Atreides are like building up these different like you have all of the troops are kind of hidden at the beginning of the game. They're all flipped down because the Fremen are hiding out, and then as those tokens are revealed, you figure out where the value is. Um, the Harkonnens are trying to find different things. It has like a little bit of a vibe of like Star Wars Rebellion, where you're trying to find where the most valuable sieges are to destroy them. Um, because it's all hidden at the beginning of the game. So it's really cool ideas that work within that system.
And is it more true to the movie or the books as far as the game's concerned?
I mean, I would say both. Like it has, some characters in there that are not necessarily in the movies as much,
Hmm.
just in terms of how it plays out. Like they're definitely drawing from the books more, but it has a few things that lean on the movies a little bit, just because of that's the familiarity. Artwork wise, it's definitely like an interpretation that's not coming from the film. If anything, it's coming from like the '80s film.
Oh, is
Like,
it really?
yeah, like there's definitely
Oh,
some
that's
cards
great.
in there that look more like Lynch
Sting.
inspired. Yeah, like Sting. Yeah, exactly. Like
Yeah, Sting's on there.
yeah, like it's not that modern look that we're getting. But that all said, it just feels like Dune. I don't know. It's just what I see in my head when I look at this universe, and it's great.
And that again, we talked about the education part. Like you play this, you know Dune.
You know, no, but like the flow of it, right? Like these two factions. You understand that the Atreides are a royal house, but they're hiding out in the desert. You understand the Harkonnens kind of suck. Um, they have a lot of power, but they're not good at using it. The sandworms and all that. Like you get the vibe of it.
Sure.
But yeah, I don't know. It's just a very thematic spin on it, but it's also such a deep and complex lore that I don't know that they could really capture all of that either.
Well, it's good that they made, like you said, at least a significant effort. It's not completely devoid of
No,
that.
no, it's a lot more than I expected. That's the best way to put it. Like,
Excellent.
hey, they did what they were supposed to. They made a good game.
All right, my number 16 is The Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth. This is a new game that we've gotten to play together from 2024. Uh, Fresh, hot at the table, Anton Balza, Bruno Cathala. This utilizes the Seven Wonders Duel mechanics and card play. And Anthony was just talking a little bit about War of the Ring. Well, here we are again, another Lord of the Rings game, but a
Yeah.
small two-player game. The Fellowship has come back, and it's the Fellowship versus the dark evil of Sauron. And the reason to have this game on the list and so high on the list is because I was one of, if not the biggest fans of Seven Wonders. And then Seven Wonders Duel came out, and I was like, 100% on board. This is great. This is fantastic. What an innovation to keep the tableau building out there, but to do it in a very unique way and make it a two-player game where things are even tighter. And then when they talked about Lord of the Rings coming out, a Lord of the Rings version, again, Lord of the Rings fan as I am, I was like, I probably will like this as well. This will probably be a nice little skin on top of Seven Wonders Duel. And then I got to play the game, and I was incredibly impressed by a number of things. First off, the production is great. The artwork is next level. The different three win conditions are well represented and have high production value. And the game itself is not just a reskin of Seven Wonders Duel. It has its own unique gameplay that comes into play because no longer are you dealing with your cost of resources versus someone else's cost of resources. Again, Seven Wonders Duel, the card game, still does a great job and still owns that, and it's still a very good game. What makes this so much better is the three thematic win conditions that are tight each and every step of the game. So there's the quest for the ring, which is represented by this long board that has this plastic slider in which the ring rates are chasing down Frodo, and you're rushing to drop the ring off to Mordor. And again, that is also represented by the military track in Seven Wonders Duel. But there's also you're conquering Middle Earth, and you're utilizing military to do so. And it's an area control. You're trying to get troops and or uh, towers in each of these different locations, and there are cards that represent that. So you're constantly battling for those different locations, destroying towers, sending troops to different areas. And then there's also rallying the support or the subjugation of the six different races in the game, which is mimics the science mechanic in Seven Wonders Duel, and each of those, when you get two of the same tokens, or at one time bonus of having three different ones, you gain a special action that really comes into play. And then, of course, the civilization boards or their wonders that give you a lot of different actions that affect one or more multiples of these different tracks. It's a fun, tight game. It allows you to really have to strategize throughout. You have to keep your eyes on all three major win conditions because any one of those could go at any time. And it really does so many things better than Seven Wonders Duel, but Seven Wonders Duel is still a fantastic game to get to the table. So that's Lord of the Rings Duel for Middle Earth.
So good. So good. This is my number 35. And honestly, I think if I redid this list, I'd move it up
It's really good.
because I've played it in the 2 weeks since we recorded that episode. I've probably played it a dozen times. And every time the win condition keeps changing. And it's so, man, getting rid of the victory points, such a good idea.
I love the idea that like you're always on a knife's edge all the
Yeah.
time. And when you play Seven Wonders Duel, it's great because the science thing does keep you on edge, and so is the military, but they're kind of loose. You can kind of let both of those slack off.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
having that one more, back and forth tug of war win condition and losing that kind of victory point general kind of nonsense really does like elevate the game.
So much. Yeah. The last game you and I played before you left, um, I almost won on like 4 or 5 different turns.
Hmm.
You saw it, took the one possible counter, and in the end won the game by a hair. Like
Yeah.
the very last turn, just like took one last location. It was such a tight game. And like I don't think I've ever had a game like that in Seven Wonders Duel. So it was
Mm,
very good.
very cool.
All right. Next up for me, at number 15, Star Wars Rebellion. We've got some Star Wars. We got some board game. We never thought we'd have it.
True.
Um, this is Fantasy Flight, and I can't believe this is 8 years old now. It came out in 2016. Designed by Corey Kineska, and at the time, like if you weren't in the hobby at the time, we didn't think we were ever going to get like a legit Star Wars board game from a big hobby designer because Hasbro had that license locked down. It was too expensive, and they just kept saying like, "It can't happen. It can't happen. It can't happen." And then it happened, and it's one of the best board games ever made. So
Yes.
it's a good thing they did it. Um, this is, at the time we compared it to War of the Ring. Like it's one of those 2 to 4 player dueling faction games, big, long, sprawling, epic experiences, and it doesn't. It has some things in common, right? There's some hidden elements, like you have the rebel base is hidden among these 32 different possible locations it could be in, and the Empire's trying to find it by moving around and attacking different locations, and the rebels are trying to obfuscate and hide it from them. But there's also just like a million other things going on here. Like you have all the different ships that you know and love. You got stormtroopers. You've got the Death Star out there. But you also have like the actual leaders of these different factions, right? You have the different characters, and yes, the characters are standees, but they kind of need to be because they have a lot of data on them. And then you have the ships and everything next to them. And it's just like when you look at this game set up with all the different ships and all the different planets and all the different leaders out there influencing the battle, it's just epic, right? Um, and the game by itself was amazing. There is an expansion though that you kind of need to have, the Rise of the Empire expansion. I would consider this essential because it changes up the scoring mechanism of the game. It gives you this like,
Military. Yeah.
yeah, it changes the way the military scores, and so it's, I think, what do they call, like epic something or epic
Hmm.
mode. Um, it just makes the game more interesting. It makes that part of the game, that one part of the game that wasn't quite interesting, it makes it much more fascinating. The content it adds to the game, I don't, whatever. It's, Rogue One stuff because that's the time at which it came out, 2017. Rogue One's interesting. It's fun. It fits with the original trilogy theming, but just that the scoring element alone is really well worth it. So, Star Wars Rebellion, it's the best Star Wars game
It is.
by a long shot,
Mhm.
and it is one of the best games. Period.
I've heard about this, and I may talk about this on a future episode.
Ooh, future episode.
Yeah,
Okay. All right.
buddy. I can't talk about it now.
Okay. Shh.
It's super secret.
Yeah, hide
I won't say what future episode.
it. Yeah, no, we'll
It
never
could be
guess.
any of them.
Yeah.
Any of the future episodes coming up.
Yeah, it's just like in 3 weeks, you're like, "Yeah, that game's alright."
That's all right. It's fine. It's cool. I don't care.
Yeah.
Whatever. Meh. It's fine. My number 15, again, one of these kind of grand Euro games to the table that does something completely different and yet so comfortable and familiar. This is Feudum from 2018 from Oddbird Games. This is all about this cartoony-ish medieval world that you have been thrown into. You've been unjustly kicked out from your fame and fortune, and you have to rebuild your feudum, your fiefdom, in this economic medieval game, and resource management. 2 to 5 players. The more players, the better, because there is some area control in this game. Now, each player throughout the game, based upon the actions that they take, and the actions are utilized by different action cards that you're going to play each round. These action cards have a number of different actions that you can take, and strategizing which cards you play, at certain turns, are essential for success. What I really like about this game is it does a lot of different things as far as what really is essential tabletop gaming. Playing action cards isn't new, but the actions that you take are unique and different. Being able to build up these little mini kingdoms as far as area control is concerned and utilizing dice for your strongholds is only one part of the game. So that allows you to play these different cards to do a lot of different things. Typically, you're moving your people around the map. You're interacting with different locations. You're traveling throughout. The board is beautiful, unique, and how you kind of move through it is challenging throughout. That could be its own little game, and that would be fantastic. But where the game really shines is as you're controlling these little mini kingdoms, you're gaining influence in one of the 6 different guilds. These 6 different guilds have actions that will affect the other guild. So your action will affect the guild next to you, which therefore affects the next guild, and so forth and so on. And if you don't have the resources of what you need from the previous guild before you, you're not actually able to utilize your actions to the utmost. So, trying to control those different guilds, trying to jockey for position and power, allows you to score victory points based upon how you best utilize that guild. I love the idea that everyone is playing into that kind of it's a competitive game. It's not a co-op game. But what you need to do, like you would in every kingdom, is you need to produce the resources that benefits everyone of it, everyone. At the same time, there's military actions. This could be somewhat considered a 4X game because you are exploring, you are expanding, you are conquering throughout the game, and you're utilizing a lot of resources, including monsters that come onto the board and just do kind of fun monstery things throughout. It's a very quirky, unique game. It's a long game. It's something that you have to really invest time into. But once you actually sit down and play through the cards, it's really very straightforward and a wonderful experience. That is Feudum.
I still haven't played this, but I will say I've kept it around because you keep talking of it so highly. Like, I backed the original, and I was like, "I still have this. I've never played it. I should get rid of it. I'll hold on to it. Someday Chris will teach me the game."
We'll have to play. Have a game day where we go through the top 100 and just pick out the games that we have not played yet and play those games.
Right, yeah. Bring them down, I'll bring them up, we'll make it happen. Alright, next up for me is, a game that has floated around my top 100 for most of the time we've done this, um, and it's usually up towards this end, although it has dropped in the past depending on, like, which versions are out. This is The Castles of Burgundy. This is my favorite of Stefan Feld's games, and, I know it's the popular, easy choice, but there's a good reason for that. It is a great game.
Hmm.
Um,
But does it have a
and
great production?
it finally does.
All right then.
Yeah, it's big and expensive and hard to move, but yeah, it's really pretty. Um, so Castle of Burgundy came out in 2011, and it was an Alea game, which means it was ugly.
Aw.
Um, but all those games back then were kind of ugly, so it's fine.
It's just the
Uh,
way the world was colored. It was all beiges and greens
beige,
and stuff.
beige for days. Uh, the benefit of this game was that for a long time you could get a copy on Amazon for like 25 bucks. It was very inexpensive. It was very accessible. Like these cheap, ugly games were actually cheap. So everybody had it. I played it a lot. I really enjoyed it. I've played it maybe hundreds of times over the last 10 years. And finally, after a failed attempt in 2019, which was not a great production, we got the special edition from Awaken Realms. And you know what? It's probably too much, but it is very pretty. Like it's a big old box. It's not quite as big as the other big stupid boxes, but it's up there. But it really does do the game justice. It's easy to look at. The graphic design supports the gameplay. The thing about the game that has always been so fascinating to me is just the way you have to make complex strategic decisions based on this limited amount of information, and it's based on the die rolls, which can change from turn to turn. I mentioned before, like in Brass, having like tactical decisions instead informing a larger strategy. That is what Castles of Burgundy is. It's very tactical, but it becomes strategic as you go along because you are picking up certain tiles, right? You're working toward, you have these certain scoring tiles you've picked up, you have these certain goods that you picked up that you need to sell. Like at a certain point, you only have so much control over which tiles are going to come out to buy and whether or not someone else grabs them before you. So you need to be constantly nimble and on your feet. And I really enjoy kind of the flow of that. It's one of the quicker moving games of this scope. Like you take like 48 turns in the game, but it moves really fast despite that. It's like a 2-hour game, even though you get to take all these 50 different actions. You have a lot of flexibility. If you ever get stuck, you can always take these other actions that are available to you. Um, every game feels a little bit different, and there's like 12 expansions to kind of tweak it and make it different. Some of them are good, some of them are not, but a lot of them are good. Castles of Burgundy, all-time great game. I would play this any day. Again, if you come here because the box is too big.
Monkey Paw.
Monkey Paw. Yeah, it's not on par with Suburbia, but it's still it's up there. It's a big ass box.
Well, I mean, you did not buy all of the plastic adventures.
No, and I specifically did not because I knew it would be too much, like size wise. So I do have two boxes. There's a big one and then like a smaller one with the tiles and then the player mat. I'm good. I'm good with that.
Fantastic. Yeah, I don't know. What can we say about this game that hasn't been said 1,000 times now at this point?
I don't know.
Everything about this game can certainly just be like, it's just another Feld, it's another point salad kind of game. I've played that. I don't need to play that again. And I've played a lot of those games. And like on Board Game Arena, I do play this, and I play this often, and I play this at 2 players and at multiple players, and it plays great. And again, I'm like, I've played this, I've done this, I play other games like this, and then I still come back to Castles of Burgundy.
Yeah.
And I can't necessarily put my finger on it as far as like what makes this the exception that I just always come back to this no matter how many other games that are like this. There's just something about this game that's just it's just I don't know, like it's just good. Like there's just something
Yeah.
like undeniable about what this game does that other games also do, and sometimes in newer ways and prettier ways, and like, but then it's like, Castles of Burgundy, man.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah, it just works. It's the best way to put it. It just works, which some games don't just work. Like
It's
you got
true.
to make them work, and this one just works.
Yeah, this was my number 41, so it works quite well for me as well.
Nice.
All right. Next up for me is my number 14. This is Mare Nostrum Empires from 2016. I think not too long ago, Anthony, we had our podcast with our friend Jeff Gamble, and we were talking about Civ games. It's major thing about Civ games, and he asked me like, "What's your favorite Civ game?" I'm like, that's really hard because Civ games are so different.
Hmm.
It could be, through the ages, a new story of civilization. It could be Seven Wonders if you want something just quick, fast, and abstract. But really, if I was going to play something as far as a Civ game is concerned, and it's- the definition varies here or there. It would be Mare Nostrum Empires, and you have your big Mediterranean massive map at the table. You have your 2 to 5 players. The board expands or contracts based upon the number of players, which is essential for these types of games. And this has 4x in droves. You are expanding, you're exploiting, you are exterminating on the board, but you're also, and what I really like about this game is you're acting as a civilization would, because there's trading in the game. You're going to be trading with other players at the table because you do need different resources throughout the game to meet the different victory conditions. And in this game, it has 4 different victory conditions. So it's not just wiping everyone off the map, because, again, thankfully, in some cases, that is not the true nature and need of a civilization to, you know, be victorious, right? Maybe it's an economic. You want to have the most gold possible, reach that gold victory. Or maybe it's resources in the markets. You want to control those and have all those, a variety of resources. Or maybe it is, in fact, that kind of military victory and you want to be able to control different capital cities on the map. Or maybe you want to build the greatest civilizations and have the greatest heroes of all time. Bright, colorful, fun, different paths to victory in a civilization game is always just well warranted. It's just, and the production here is top notch. And again, a lot of great games out there for civilization, and this is just one of the most brilliant games. And this is from Academy Games, and they know how to build these games. And I'm so appreciative of this. This is Mare Nostrum Empires.
Toss this one in the trunk. We're playing this on that game day.
Yeah, buddy.
Yeah, you walked me through this one at length. I remember when you're at Origins, you were showing me this. You're like, "I played this recently; it's really good." And we spent like 20 minutes standing over it. And you're like,
Yeah,
walking. This is you do this, and then you do this, and then you do this. I'm like, this looks amazing.
yeah.
And I've still never played it. I don't have a copy because I have like 5 other Civ games.
Civ games are great. Yeah,
I'm like, I can't buy any more Civ games. But I really, really would like to play this.
nice.
All right. Next up, number 13 for me is a brand new game from this year, the second one on the list this week. Slay the Spire, the board game. This is the cardboard implementation of the Slay the Spire video game, which has been out for several years now, and both of us have put dozens, if not hundreds, of hours into.
Yes.
Um, and I did not back this when it was first up on
Ah,
Kickstarter because I looked at it and I was like, "There's no way that's going to work." It's not. There's no way. There's too many cards. The cards upgrade. The numbers are off the charts. Like, how are they going to be able to manage the tracking? Um, and then it came out earlier this year in the spring, or shipped to backers, and the scuttlebutt, the reviews were like, "Hey, this actually works, y'all." Like, they figured it out. They managed to make this work. And so I, being the very disciplined man that I am, uh, immediately went and bought a copy. So this this game is Slay the Spire. If you've played the video game, you're going to recognize the cards, you're going to recognize the enemy, you're going to recognize the basic mechanics. Everything feels the same, but it does that really clever trick. Like, if you ever watch like a movie that's based on a thing that you saw when you were a kid, and you're like, "This is great. It's just like I remember." But if you go back and watch that thing from when you were a kid, you're like, "This is actually terrible." Like, this is that. It makes you feel like you're playing the video game, but it can't actually replicate those mechanics because the game wouldn't be good if it did that. It would just be too sprawling and too hard to keep track of. So what they've done is they've boiled down certain elements of it, like the numbers are all smaller, right? The HP, the damage you deal, it's all much smaller. It's manageable. They have like little tokens that keep track of things, but they really like boil it down to keep it simple. The amount of things that you're able to purchase and upgrade, like those are giant decks, but it's still like smaller and more manageable, and the mechanics are built within this smaller scope. They made the game cooperative, so you can play with 1 to 4 players, and you can help each other out and take out these different enemies. Like, yeah, that enemy's going to keep hitting you, but the other people can help you destroy it. All of this kind of combines to make the game just like an amazingly effective implementation of this video game that I already really enjoyed, but now I can play with other people. Um, and honestly, I really like playing this one solo at the table. Like, I'll play Slay the Spire all day on my computer, on my iPad, whatever. But it's sometimes you just want to play something analog and not have a screen in front of your face, and this is a great way to do that. It is expensive because it comes with like almost 800 cards and almost 500 sleeves, and it has to because the cards are double sided and they flip over when they upgrade. But the packaging is amazing. The way it all comes out is really good. I can set the game up in like 10 minutes despite all the stuff in the box. Slay the Spire, like super blown away. I can't believe they pulled it off, and not just pulled it off, but like really works really well.
It's really surprising. I again, I gotta applaud them greatly because first there was no reason to do this
No,
because they had everything they could ever possibly want, and I've played this game so many times I just keep forgetting and falling asleep. But it is it just owned its genre. I mean, there's so many others of those kind of roguelike games out there, and this just kind of was its thing. And it seemed like a fool's errand to kind of produce this as a tabletop game because how could they replicate it?
hmm
And they did.
yeah,
And in fact, I think it might be better than the video game
ooh, interesting.
because I really did enjoy that cooperative element to the game.
Yeah, that really does change things. Like if you just played this by yourself, you're like, okay, I could do the video game of this, or I could play this.
Yes,
But the co-op is really fascinating.
and it's cool to see or to kind of experience the battles that other people are having at the same time too.
hmm
And when you play the video game, it's fun, but it does play into that kind of like one person versus the world kind of situation. But after a while, you're like, I'm kind of lonely.
Yeah, and honestly, like
Yeah,
given your run, you either can do it or you can't.
yeah,
Like you sometimes you can go into a battle and see who comes out, and you're like, ugh, all right, reset. Like I'm just,
sure.
especially in like the first like 20 minutes of a run, you're like, I don't have what I need to beat this guy,
Yeah, I couldn't.
so
I
I'm
didn't
just
pick up
gonna
the
reset.
cards. Yeah,
With the co-op element, you're like, I think we can make this work. Like if I juggle this and you deal with that, and then when you're done with dealing with that, you come back and help me, and I hopefully I don't die by then. Like that's a cool mechanic. It just really adds a lot more strategic elements to it, which is awesome.
absolutely. All right. Uh, I guess from that to this, my number 13 is Freedom, the Underground Railroad.
Oh gosh.
This has not been on my list for quite some time, and I was kind of surprised it wasn't because I went back and I looked at my ratings, and this game is a 10 for me. And I was trying to remember why it wasn't on my top 100, and I think honestly was because the experiences that we had. I remember we played this as a group, Anthony.
hmm
It was it really felt so emotional to play this,
Yeah.
and there's again, we don't have to convince an audience that loves tabletop gaming and listen to a podcast for 500 episodes that there's something about tabletop gaming that somehow, for some way, in some reason, cardboard and wood and plastic and I don't know, gameplay elevates things and connects with us in a real meaningful way. Once again, see the journal for more details on that. So, Freedom the Underground Railroad, and I really want to read this line from Board Game Geek because I think it encapsulates it so beautifully. Early in the history of the United States, slavery was an institution that seemed unmovable, but with the efforts of men and women across the country, it was toppled. And when you play this game, you're dealing with trying to overcome the insurmountable nature or insurmountableness of human nature. Like, this is a thing that exists. It has always existed if you were born in those times, and it seemed like it always would. Why wouldn't it? It seemed as apparent as the sun rising and setting every day. Like, this is the way life is. And when you play this game, which is a co op game, in which you're trying to meet these three goals of getting slave families up through the Underground Railroad, which you are one of the abolitionists supporting this movement. As you're trying to get them through these different pathways up to Canada and trying to avoid the slave catchers, and also at the same time try to keep as many slave families alive as possible, and also at the same time trying to deal with the American politicians to change this policy. And it does seem insurmountable. It does seem impossible. It does seem immovable. And you're asked to play this game. And there's just so again, we can get it there's so much to be said about this game, but it certainly does evoke and it and when you first look at the game, you're like, "How?" It's these little wooden natural wooden cubes, and it's this kind of bare bones map. It's got some value to it. It's got some artwork to the cards and things like that. And by the time you end up playing, finishing this game, every one of those cubes are just so essential. You feel it. You feel this game. You feel the challenges here. You feel the costs that come along with this. You feel the sacrifices that are made along the way. It really is a wonderful and heartbreaking experience at the same time, but also liberating and inspiring that we can move mountains and that things are possible if we work together. And it's just a sublime game. Freedom, the Underground Railroad.
Man, bring it all down heavy now.
I'm telling you. I mean, to
Yeah.
to be fair, like I just talked about Mare Nostrum from Academy Games. This is also from Academy Games. Like they know how to do games.
Yeah.
They do a
Yeah.
great job. So
Yeah. Well, I don't have much to add to that. I mean, I agree with everything you said. I think Freedom is a brilliant game. And I guess for me, it falls in the same boat. Like, why isn't it on my list? I'm not sure. I guess I probably haven't played it since,
yeah, it's been a
like,
while.
properly since that I use it in my classroom. I go through it. I've photographed it and run lessons with it. But have I sat down and played it with a group in 5 6 years? I don't think I have. I should.
We should put this on our list.
Yeah. All right. Um, my number 12, a little more traditional on my end, and a game that's been on my list for a long time. Terraforming Mars. Now, there have been a bunch of different versions of this over the years. We have Ares Expedition, which you talked about a few weeks ago. We have the dice game, which came out last year. Um, but for me, it's still the original, like the one that you shuffled off to find copies of in 2016, brought home with us, and made me a rock star in Pittsburgh because I was the only person who had it for like 4 months. Um, it's it it's broken in so many ways. The deck is overwhelming. Most of the expansions aren't very good, but
Sure.
the core of the game and part of its theming, I love space. I love space exploration, um, and part of it's just the tableau building element and how that kind of manifests on the board. And then another significant part of it too is just the way the solo game works, because that's how I played the game the most, of trying to race and complete all the different objectives yourself on your own, within a certain amount of time. It all just comes together and just makes this kind of sublime experience that I pull out regularly. This game hits my table at least once a month, sometimes multiple times a month. Yes, there's an app. Sometimes I play it, but honestly, I will go to the trouble of setting up the board game and playing through it. And I've played through every corporation in this game, many of them multiple times, solo and with groups. I know it inside and out. Like if I sit down and play the game for the first time with new people, I will pull the corporations out and walk them through what their gameplay will be like. Like this skit, if we're going to play Eco Line, you're going to have this kind of thing. Watch out for people throwing asteroids at you. Make sure you spend them as soon as you get them. Like all these things that kind of you internalize when you play something enough. And I don't play that many games enough, right? So in the last 8 years, other than Keyforge, this is the game I've played the most,
Mm.
and I love it for that. Like I'm not going to argue with any of the problems people have with it. Like the production quality, meh. The the balance of the cards, the fact that you can get a whole hand of cards that are useless to you towards the end of the game,
yeah.
sure. I yeah, can't argue with that.
Or the beginning of the
Um,
game.
or the beginning of the game. Yeah, like the draft being necessary and
Yeah.
how some people's friends decide to play without the draft and ruin a perfectly good game night. You
hmm
know, that happens. Um, it's a fiddly mess, but this is like the kind of fiddly mess that's like only happens when you have like a person making a game on their own and trying to make it work as well as they can, right? And that's the thing that we get in board games that you don't get in other types of media. Everything else is like boiled down. You don't get tours anymore in anything because it's too expensive to produce things. Board games aren't that, right?
hmm
Somebody can make a game and it can be really smart, but also broken a little bit and still be brilliant in its own way. And that for me, that's Terraforming Mars. I really enjoy it.
It's a great game, and it's one of those games where, like, I think almost like I think of it like almost like in a movie where you have to
Mm,
suspend disbelief
Yeah,
where
a little bit.
you're just like, yeah, that's a problem. Yeah, that's a problem too. Yeah, those are problems too. But just play it. It's fine. Like
It'll be good.
if you can get into it and you can roll with it a little bit, all of those things kind of fall to the background. They're there, but they
Right.
fall to the background, and it is certainly a crazy enjoyable experience. It does feel like a raw version of a great game, and obviously the expansions are hit and miss, more misses than hit. But even still, it's still a great game. Just straight off, like there's no you can't argue with it. It's just a great game. Like despite all of those things, it's fantastic.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
All right, my number 12 is Shipyard from 2003, which is the version I love and own. But there's also a new version that came out in 2023, 20 years later, 20 years the anniversary, kind of give or take. Shipyard. Uh, Vladimir Suchi. It's the game that brought Vladimir Suchi into my life, and I could not be happier. At first, I was scared because it's a game with a ton of little chits at the table. And again, like the title tells you, it's a shipyard. So it's 19th century, and we're transporting goods and we're dealing with naval forces. And it's rondels for days because Vladimir Suchi loves his rondels. And basically, you're building different ships, and what type of ships and what you're putting on those ships depend greatly based upon your secret end game goal cards. Again, another fascinating, wonderful feature like Bora Bora, you get to decide what you want to score as the game goes on. So you'll be able to get rid of those, scoring cards because they're just not working for you. This game also reminds me, I guess I should say, like Castel, where you're building up that pyramid of different performers. Here, you're actually building up, utilizing little cardboard boards. You're building up a ship on your board. You're building up a little tableau of a ship, and you're building up the different pieces. You're putting captains and crew on it. You're putting different resources and pieces on it, and you're doing all of that based on these different rondels that come into play. It's again, it's one of those games like we just talked about Terraforming Mars, which seems big, seems obtuse, but basically it comes down to building the ships, running those ships through different canals, and you get to pick those different pathways that you go into it. And the theme comes through. It really does feel like a thematic game. And those rondels work really great. It's not overwhelming as far as that's concerned. And it's a nice, crunchy game to get to the table and a lot of fun throughout. That's Shipyard.
Shipyard looks awesome. I actually picked up a copy of the new version
Ooh,
on
fancy.
a sale not too long ago. I have not opened it up yet, but I'm looking forward to playing it based on your many, many recommendations over the years.
Yay! Put on the list.
Yeah, I'm gonna do it.
We'll have to have a convention at this point for the number of
I
games that we
know
have to
it's
put
a
on
lot of
the
stuff on the list.
list.
You'd think after like this many years of knowing each other, we would have gotten through all these, but
uh,
nope. All right, my last one for this week, number 11. Last one before we get to the top 10. Crazy.
ooh.
I know. This is 2017's Clans of Caledonia. So this is designed by Juma Al Juju, artwork by Clemens Franz, and from Karma Games, which for a long time was their only game, but recently they've been releasing a lot of new stuff, including an expansion for this, which is going up on Kickstarter next month with a bunch of new stuff. This is a industrial farming, not industrial. That's the new one. This is a farming game. There's no industry here.
Well,
Uh, it,
yeah,
yeah, I guess you're building up industry,
yeah.
but you have a personal little player board that has a bunch of different pieces on it, right? And similar to like, Terra Mystica, where you're taking them off and putting them out on the main map, you are removing these from your personal board, and then that activates different production, right? So if you put out a sheep, you will produce wool. If you put out a cow, you will produce milk. If you put out a wheat, you produce two wheat, because wheat, big yields or whatever. And then you have advanced products as well that will then consume those other things. So if you put out a cheese, you will produce cheese if you have milk. So you want to kind of like balance this out and put things out in a way where you're going to have the resources you need to produce the other resources. Or you can buy them because there's a market in the game as well that adjusts based on You can sell stuff to it, or you can buy stuff from it, and then we'll adjust the price accordingly. The map in the middle of the table is just these different hexes that kind of combine together, and it's Caledonia, it's Scotland, so it's a bunch of different locks and waterways, kind of mishmashing their way across the board, and you're trying to spread out and have things connected to each other through waterways and different locations so you can have as much network as possible across the board. So you want to have this large network because that's how you're going to score at the end of the game. You're also going to score during the game by completing contracts. So there's contract board. You can purchase contracts from the board. At the beginning of the game, they will pay you to take them, but towards the end, they cost a bunch. It's just a really tight, fun, economic Euro game that does not take up much space, does not cost a whole bunch of money, has a lot of depth to it, and I've really enjoyed this one. I play it a lot over the years. You get asymmetrical powers with your clan at the beginning of the game. There are some, if you have the Kickstarter edition, that are not balanced that I would recommend removing, especially if you have new players. But for the most part, they all do something fun and different. Like you can have extra milk, or you can mess with the board a little bit. You can age your whiskey. Um, it's just a really good time, and there's a lot of interactivity because it almost has that like worker placement type of um, element where you're like taking spaces on the board that take away from other people's ability to place out and generate income. So, Plans of Caledonia, lots of fun.
I remember this came out. This was a another when they came on Kickstarter. They had to shrink the production down in order to be able to ship it. And I remember people getting it. It was such an unusual game, and
Yeah.
it was just like, is this going to do a thing? It can't really do a thing, right? Like it's going to be another one of those forgettable kind of Kickstarter games that go out there and like maybe a couple of people pick it up and they regret it almost instantly because again
Hmm.
it had to be shrunk down. This was the early days of Kickstarter where you really had independent companies or independent individuals producing these games, and this game was everywhere. Like people really enjoyed this game and got. I played this a lot. I don't own a
Yeah.
copy of this, and I played this a bunch of game nights. People really got this game to the table, and it's surprising because again, a lot of other games own this real estate, and it's surprising for this little game to come in there and just own the table time together. Just really impressed by that.
Yeah, it did pretty well on Kickstarter. It made like 350, which is a
Hmm.
lot for like a Euro like this, and it was like 7 years ago.
Yeah.
But it at the same time, it's built an audience over the years. Like,
Hmm.
I don't think this designer ever planned on releasing more stuff because it was like 5 years before he came out and said, "I'm making more stuff," right? I
Sure.
think this was like a side project. It did really well. It was fun, but then it like built and grew, and now it's on Board Game Arena and it's
Hmm.
on Tabletopia, and everybody's playing it. Um, I dig it. I think it's a really fun, interesting spin on this stuff. And like people always describe it as a combination of all these different mechanics,
Hmm.
which it is, but it also feels like its own thing. Like I feel like we have a lot of games that come out these days that are just a mishmash of different mechanics. Like Arc Nova, I can point to like the 6 different mechanics that designer mashed together. This has that, but somehow they combine into something that feels like its own thing. Um, Even when you can say that's Terra Mystica and that's a little bit of this and that's a little bit of that, um, it still feels unique. So I know it's one of those things that it- I it grew on me over time, and then eventually I'm like, I guess this is almost in my top 10. I don't
Oh,
know. I dig this. So
very
Plans of
nice.
Caledonia, folks.
All right. Well, my number 11 is Star Trek Ascendancy from 2016. This is from Gale Force 9 Games. I've been talking about a bunch of Civ games, and not every Civ game needs to be a 4X game, but this is a Civ game that really leans into the 4X. This is exploring, expanding, exploiting, and of course, exterminating. So
Yeah.
you play one as at least since it's a Star Trek universe, you can play as one of the four different Star Trek factions that are in play here. Uh, typically you have your Federation, your Klingons, and your Romulans. That's what most people out there know who are not Trekkies out there. But this game has expanded greatly with a lot of the other factions. So you might also know the Kardashians and the Ferengi that come into play. There's the Dominion. There's the Borg that adds kind of like a joint, not necessarily co-op competitive kind of element because you got to take down the Borg throughout the game. Do you like Twilight Imperium? Do you like Eclipse? Do you like to build up these massive, epic space opera civilizations? Great. this might be the game for you. Do you love Star Trek? This is absolutely the game for you because it truly does thematically invest a lot of like knowledge from the Star Trek universe. Like the factions do play like the factions from all the movies and TV shows out there. So depending on the faction that you play, there's there's a little bit of different gameplay that's involved with that. But basically what it comes down to is you're building towards your ascendancy goal and you start out with your home planet and you build out these space pathways. You again you explore these different planetary systems and a lot of different, how would you say it, all of these different scenarios come into play that are um, are different situations that happened in Star Trek throughout the different iterations. You deal with those situations. You build up your civilizations on those different planets, and then of course you encounter your counterparts across. And typically you're battling, but also just like any other good Civ game, you're also dealing resources and trading and negotiations throughout. So it offers a lot of that value of a 4X Civ game, but with the Star Trek obviously throughout in a very good thematic way. It's just not just pasted on. There's a lot of good gameplay here, and again, endless numbers of expansions. And I think next year they're actually rebooting it, so it's going to get a formal kind of reboot, shrunk down, essential kind of edition. Star Trek Ascendancy. If you love Star Trek and you love these kind of Civ 4X games, this is perfect for you.
Yeah, this game's awesome. I remember the first time we played it at Gen Con. We got tickets to an event, like right when it came out, and we ran out of time, and they're like, "You guys got to go." We're like,
It's
no,
a
we want to finish
long
the
game.
game.
Yeah.
Yeah, they only gave us 3 hours. I'm like, that's not enough time at all.
Oh.
Uh, but yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm excited for the new edition coming out. I think it's supposed to come out on GameFound in like 3-4 months, so
Mm.
that'll be good.
Yeah, nice streamlined version. Yeah, it's about an hour per player at least on this game.
Yeah, which is more than that. So
Yeah.
yeah, that's the long game. At least all the people are finally out. The big problem with this game, I know forever, is we're like, we have new factions coming, and they just kept not releasing them.
Sure.
Everything got delayed forever. So it'll be good
Sure.
to have it all together.
All right, everyone. Well, there you go. Our episode 499, our top 100 games of all time, number 20 to number 11. Next week, of course, episode 500, spectacular. Our top 100 games of all times, number 10 to number 1. We hope that you join us on YouTube and watch it live and join us in the chat. If not, you could watch the video there or join us on Podcast Player or, of course, on Patreon. Thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for supporting us. Until next time, this is Chris.
And this is Anthony.
And we'll save you all a seat at the table. Take care, everyone.